Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Jason, and with me, as always, is the amazing co-host, Julia. How are you today, Julia?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing great, thanks. Really excited about today's topic because it's something many English learners struggle with.
Absolutely. Today, we're talking about something that's super important, but often really hard staying consistent when learning English.
Yes, consistency is like the secret sauce for success in any learning process. But honestly, it's easier said than done. Many learners start strong, but then find it tough to keep up regularly.
Right. I think we've all been there, whether it's losing motivation, feeling overwhelmed, or just life getting in the way. So if you've ever struggled to stay consistent with your English practice, you're definitely not alone.
And that's exactly why we want to dive into this topic today to help you understand why consistency matters so much and share practical tips to help you stick with your English learning journey.
We'll also talk about common challenges that cause inconsistency and how you can overcome them. Plus, we'll share some motivation to keep you going, even when things get tough.
So, whether you're learning English for school, work, travel, or just for fun, this episode is for you. By the end, we hope you'll feel inspired and ready to build a consistent English learning habit.
Perfect. So, grab a cup of tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started. Stay tuned. All right, Julia, let's start by really understanding what we mean by consistency. It sounds simple, but I think a lot of learners might get confused about it. How would you explain consistency when it comes to learning English?
Good question, Jason. To me, consistency means practicing English regularly and making it a habit, not necessarily for hours every day, but showing up every day or almost every day, even if it's just for a few minutes.
That makes sense. So, it's more about doing something regularly than doing a lot all at once.
Exactly. It's about creating a routine. For example, studying 10 or 15 minutes every day can be much more effective than cramming for 3 hours once a week.
I love that. I think sometimes people get stuck thinking they have to be perfect or spend a lot of time. And if they don't, they feel like giving up.
Yes, that's a common myth, that consistency means being perfect every day. But really, it's about being steady over time. Even small imperfect efforts add up.
So consistency is kind of like putting money in a savings account little by little rather than one big deposit and then nothing.
Exactly. Over time, those small deposits of effort build up your skills, your confidence, and your fluency.
And why do you think consistency is so important for English learners specifically?
Well, language learning is a gradual process. Your brain needs time and repeated exposure to remember vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Without consistency, it's easy to forget what you've learned.
True. I've noticed when I take a long break from practicing a language, I lose a lot of what I gained.
Right. Consistency helps with long-term memory and makes learning more natural. Plus, it helps reduce stress because you're not trying to learn everything at once.
So, the big takeaway is consistent, steady practice beats intense but irregular study.
Yes, and building this habit can also make learning part of your daily life, not just a chore.
That's a great mindset. Okay, now that we know what consistency is and why it matters, let's explore why people find it hard to keep it up. All right, Julia, now that we've talked about what consistency really means and why it's so important, let's get real. Why do so many people struggle with staying consistent in their English learning?
Great question. From my experience, there are a few big reasons. The first one that comes to mind is lack of motivation. It's hard to stay motivated every day, especially when progress feels slow.
Yes, motivation is like a battery. Sometimes it's full, sometimes it's almost empty. And if your motivation runs out, it's tough to keep going.
Exactly. Another reason is distractions. Life is busy, right? Work, family, social media, other responsibilities. It's easy for English practice to fall to the bottom of the list.
Totally. I think many learners underestimate how much time they actually spend on distractions, and then they wonder why they don't have time to study.
Right. And there's also the problem of unrealistic goals. Some people expect to become fluent super fast, so when they don't see immediate results, they get discouraged and stop.
Oh, that's a big one. I've seen learners set these huge goals like, I'll learn 1,000 words in a month, and when they don't hit that, they feel like failures.
Exactly. That kind of pressure can be overwhelming and lead to burnout.
Speaking of burnout, I think that's another big reason. Sometimes learners push themselves too hard for too long and then just burn out and take long breaks.
Yes, burnout is real. Consistency isn't about working nonstop, it's about pacing yourself so you don't get exhausted.
I also think some people struggle because they don't have a clear plan or structure. Without a plan, it's easy to feel lost and give up.
Good point. When you don't know what to study or how to practice, it can feel overwhelming, and that kills motivation.
And lastly, I'd add fear of making mistakes or lack of confidence. Sometimes learners avoid practicing because they're afraid to speak or write incorrectly.
That's a big barrier, but honestly, making mistakes is part of learning. Avoiding practice just slows down progress.
So to summarize, the main reasons are lack of motivation, distractions, unrealistic goals, burnout, no clear plan, and fear of mistakes.
Yes, and the good news is that understanding these challenges is the first step to overcoming them.
Absolutely. In the next section, we'll talk about practical tips to help build and maintain your consistency, even when these challenges pop up. All right, Julia, now that we've talked about why staying consistent is tough, let's get into the good stuff, some practical tips that can really help our listeners build and keep that consistency going.
Yes, let's do it. The first and most important tip I always recommend is setting small, realistic goals. Instead of saying, I want to master English in 3 months, try something like, I'll practice English for 10 minutes every day.
That's a great point. Small goals feel manageable and less intimidating. When you achieve them, it boosts your confidence and motivates you to keep going.
Exactly. Breaking your learning into bite-sized pieces makes it easier to fit into your daily routine, like practicing one new word or phrase each day or listening to a short podcast episode.
And that leads to my next tip, building a habit by linking your English practice to something you already do every day. For example, you could practice right after brushing your teeth or during your commute.
Yes, this is called habit stacking. When you attach a new habit to an existing one, it's easier to remember and do it consistently.
Another helpful tip is to use reminders and trackers. You can set phone alarms, use habit tracking apps, or even a simple calendar where you check off each day you practice.
Tracking your progress is motivating because you can see how far you've come. Plus, it makes it harder to skip practice when you want to keep your streak going.
One thing I always tell learners is to mix up your learning activities to keep things fun and interesting. Instead of just studying grammar or vocabulary, try watching movies, listening to music, chatting with friends, or playing language games.
That's so important. When learning becomes enjoyable, it's easier to stay consistent because it doesn't feel like a boring task.
Also, don't forget to be kind to yourself. It's okay to miss a day or have an off day. Consistency isn't about perfection, it's about coming back after a break.
Yes, self-compassion is key. If you slip up, just restart the next day without guilt. The important thing is to keep moving forward.
Another tip is to set clear priorities and manage your time. Sometimes people struggle because they don't make their English learning a priority in their schedule.
Right. Even busy people can find 10 minutes if they make it a priority. Planning your practice time like an appointment helps a lot.
And finally, don't forget the power of accountability. Tell a friend or join a study group so someone can encourage you and keep you motivated.
Yes, having someone to practice with or check in with can really boost your consistency. It creates a sense of responsibility.
So, to recap, some of the key tips are setting small goals, habit stacking, using reminders, mixing activities, being kind to yourself, managing time, and finding accountability.
And remember, consistency is a journey. It takes time, patience, and practice. But with these strategies, it's definitely possible to make English learning a regular part of your life.
Absolutely. Keep trying and don't give up. The results will come. Julia, after all these tips, I think it's really important to remind our listeners that staying consistent isn't always easy, but it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely, Jason. Learning any language, especially English, takes time and effort. There will be ups and downs, but every little step forward counts.
I love this quote I heard recently. Success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. It really fits perfectly with consistency, don't you think?
Yes, that's so true. Sometimes it's the small daily practices that make the biggest difference over time. Progress might be slow, but it's still progress.
And here's another thing. It's okay if you don't feel motivated every day. Motivation can come and go, but what keeps you going is discipline and your commitment to your goals.
Right? Think of consistency as showing up for yourself. Even on days when you don't feel like practicing, if you still do something small, you're winning.
I also want to encourage listeners to change how they think about mistakes and setbacks. Instead of seeing them as failures, try to see them as part of the learning process.
Exactly. Every mistake is a chance to learn something new. Don't be afraid of making errors. It means you're trying, and that's how growth happens.
Another thing I find helpful is to celebrate small wins. Did you learn a new word today? Did you listen to an English podcast for 5 minutes? That's a win.
Celebrating progress, no matter how small, boosts your confidence and helps keep you motivated.
And remember, consistency isn't about being perfect, it's about being persistent. It's about choosing to keep going, even when it's hard.
Yes, so to all our listeners out there, keep pushing forward, be patient with yourself, and trust the process. Your hard work will pay off.
We believe in you. Keep practicing, and remember every day you practice English. You're getting better and closer to your goals. Julia, sometimes we get questions from our listeners about consistency. Maybe we can share a couple today and talk through some real-life scenarios?
Great idea, Jason. It always helps to hear examples and how to handle them. Do you have a question to start with?
Yes. One listener asked, I want to practice English every day, but I keep forgetting. How can I remember to study consistently? What would you say to that?
That's a common problem. My advice is to create reminders like setting an alarm on your phone at the same time every day or attaching your practice to a daily habit, like having breakfast or before bed.
Right. And making your practice visible helps too. For example, leaving your English book or notebook somewhere, you'll see it often.
Exactly. The goal is to make it hard to forget because it becomes part of your daily routine.
Here's another question. Sometimes I get discouraged because I don't see improvement. How can I stay motivated? What do you think?
That's tough, but it's normal. I suggest keeping a journal or log of your practice. Write down what you did and any small improvements you notice. When you look back, you'll see your progress.
Also, try to celebrate small wins, like understanding a new phrase or completing a lesson. Recognizing these moments keeps motivation alive.
And don't compare yourself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace.
Perfect advice. One last scenario: I'm busy with work and family. How can I find time to practice consistently?
Busy schedules are a challenge for many. My tip is to start small. Even 5 to 10 minutes daily can make a difference.
And try to use pockets of time, like listening to English podcasts during your commute or practicing vocabulary while cooking.
Yes, consistency is about fitting English into your life, not letting it take over your life.
Great points, Julia. I hope these answers help our listeners feel less alone and more prepared to tackle consistency.
Definitely. If you have questions, send them our way. We love hearing from you.
Well, Julia, we've covered a lot today about struggling to stay consistent and how to overcome those challenges.
Yes, we talked about what consistency really means, why it's so important, the common reasons people struggle, and practical tips to help build that consistency.
And we also shared some motivational insights to keep our listeners inspired. Plus, answered some common questions from real learners.
Exactly. The key message is this: consistency doesn't mean being perfect every day. It means making a commitment to show up for yourself regularly, even if it's just a little bit.
That's right. It's okay to have ups and downs. What matters is that you keep going and don't give up.
Remember, learning English is a journey, and every step you take moves you closer to your goal.
So, to all our listeners, keep practicing, stay patient, and believe in your ability to improve.
We believe in you too. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next episode of the English Learning Podcast.
Take care, everyone. Keep consistent and keep growing. And that wraps up today's episode on struggling to stay consistent with your English learning.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found some useful tips and motivation to help you stay on track.
If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends who are also learning English.
Yes, and if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover in future episodes, send us a message or comment below. We love hearing from you.
Also, follow us on social media for extra tips and updates about new episodes.
Remember, consistency is the key to success. Keep practicing every day, even if it's just a little bit.
Thanks again for joining us on the English Learning Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Stay motivated and keep learning.